Hello and welcome to Across the Bifrost, the Mighty Thor podcast, where we explore the world of Marvel's Mighty Thor. I am your host, Ryan Doze, and I am excited for Halloween. It's October 31st. We are ready for the spookiest of all holidays, the most haunting of all hours. And here on Across the Bifrost, we celebrate holidays by digging into some Thor stories. So today we're going to do just that. We have two fantastic issues of Thor to break down with you. Also bringing back my friend Eric Fisher to have this little chat with me. We are looking at the time that Thor, the god of thunder, faced off against Dracula, the lord of the vampires. I mean, how much more like Halloween does it get when it comes to Dracula and vampires? And it's going to be fantastic. I promise you, it's going to be a good chat. You're not going to want to miss it. Today's episode is just a lot of fun. I think you're really going to enjoy it. For those of you that have gone to Facebook and joined our brand new group, thank you very much. Continuing the conversation there is a way that you can help out the show and just honestly meet some other awesome Thor fans. If you're following us on Instagram also, thank you very much. That's at Mighty Thor Podcast. If you have yet to go there and follow and like and comment and share and do all the things. If you have gone and given us a rating, a review, or a subscription, thank you. We appreciate that. If you haven't, go to iTunes, go to Spotify, do all of that. We would appreciate it. Leave us a 5-star review and tell us what you love about the show. Maybe what you love about the show is that we do these specials from time to time. Hey, that's fantastic. I believe we did an All Father's Day special for Father's Day way back in the day. That feels like forever ago now. But thank you very much. If you've listened, you've supported us in any way, truly thank you. This episode was so much fun to record. It was a little difficult to record because I have some excited kids here at my house. My kids are so excited for Halloween. I'm so excited for Halloween. They were so excited for Halloween that they actually interrupted the recording so many times. So I hope that you can bear with a little bit of audio little issue, but I really do believe we put together a fantastic, fun show for you. So, without further ado, let's break down these two issues of the Mighty Thor where Thor faces off against Dracula. Okay, everyone, welcome into our Halloween special here on Across the Bifrost. I am joined by my good friend Eric Fisher to talk about some Thor comics in the early 80s. Eric, how's it going tonight, man?
Oh, not too bad, man. Glad to be here.
We are in a spooky mood tonight, so I figured we would talk about just the time that Thor decided to go and fight Dracula. It feels appropriate, and it is a crazy story. So, just off the top, when you read these issues, what were were you looking forward to them? Were you like, I don't know about this? Going into it, what were you thinking about when I gave you these issues to read?
So I it's funny. I love Dracula. All of the original Universal monsters. When I was a kid, I used to go get these books from a school library that were written in the late '60s maybe.
Yeah.
And there was just this run of these books about the Universal monsters like Frankenstein and the Blob and Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. So it was just this series of these books about these old movies. And I'd read them multiple times, and I did book reports on them and stuff like that. It's pretty funny. So yeah, Dracula has a special place in my heart. So I was looking forward to reading these, and I'm glad I did because they were good. It was a good time.
The bringing up the Universal monsters, I absolutely love the Universal monster stories. Like you mentioned, like Dracula and the Wolfman, and then you got like Creature from the Black Lagoon, Frankenstein, like all that. So actually, when I was preparing and prepping for this, I didn't tell you this, but when I was prepping for this, I was like, well, I feel like having some fun. It's Halloween. I don't really get into like the gorier horror stuff. So I was like, what can I watch? What can I watch while I sit here and get ready for the show? So I just watched Young Frankenstein as I was prepping for this whole thing, and I'm like I'm in the mood to talk Dracula and to talk some old school monster stories. But if you're ready to go, man, we're going to jump into these 2 issues of the Mighty Thor. These issues that we're going to talk about came out in the summer of 1983. So if you've been following along with our throwback series, this is a little bit of a departure from that. And it's also not really current. So this is why we're calling this the Halloween special, is it really takes place out of continuity from our normal series that we like to do. This is a fun episode that I hope you guys enjoy for Halloween. These issues came out in June and July. The first issue we're going to talk about is Thor 332. It is entitled The Blood of a Goddess. And then we'll close our conversation talking about issue 333, entitled Like a Bat Out of Heaven. So before we jump into those issues individually and break them down with Eric and get his thoughts and just honestly have some laughs with some, just insane over the top Dracula action. Wanted to tell you guys, the listeners, about the creative team that was on these books, because we haven't really talked about any of these people yet in our throwback stuff or even in our little spotlights that we've done. And I think there's some really cool connections. I know there's some cool connections for Eric here, because Eric, I'm sure he'll go into this, is a huge Transformers fan. There's a lot of Transformers connections here. There's also some connections to Moon Knight and Werewolf by Night, some, famous horror related characters in Marvel Comics at this time. But let's jump into who wrote these issues of the Mighty Thor. They were written by Alan Zelenetz, who is not really a name maybe modern fans of Thor might have heard of, but he plays I would say an interesting role in the writing history of Thor. Up until this point, he had done a few issues of some random fill-in books, but then he would go on to do books like Moon Knight, Marvel Fanfare, which was a collecting book of they'd get one hero to come in for a book, and then another hero would come in for the next one, kind of a compilation style title. Then he worked on some sword and sorcery titles like Kull the Conqueror and Conan the Barbarian. And then he was able to do some What If comics. A few titles you may have heard of are What If Bullseye Had Not Killed Elektra, based off of the Frank Miller Daredevil comic where Bullseye kills Elektra. He asked the question, what if Elektra had not died that night? And then he did we almost did an episode on this What If issue actually way back when. What if Thor of Asgard had met Conan the Barbarian? And that issue of What If you actually can't find on Marvel Unlimited, so we weren't able to do it. But that was a What If issue that Alan Zelenetz did, and it combined 2 characters that he was currently writing at the time. He did a brief run on Thor, which was really just 7-8 issues in 1983, and then he did a few Thor annuals. The thing that makes Alan Zelenetz an interesting figure in the history of writing Thor comics is he is the last writer to pen stories for Thor before the book is taken over by a little-known author that you may have heard of that wrote Thor in the 80s, Mr. Walt Simonson. So Alan Zelenetz is given the dubious task of finishing out this run of Thor before creative was given over to Walt Simonson. So Eric, just the writer of these issues, he's really playing not a pivotal role, but kind of a transitional role in the book. Did you know anything about Alan Zelenetz before you read these issues?
I didn't really. So his name was vaguely familiar when I was looking over the notes he sent me, and so
Okay.
I pulled him up, online and just looked at it, at his, his resume, what have you, and as I was reading through it, I was like, oh yeah, I know. Like you said, the What If, I had that copy of What If Bullseye hadn't killed Elektra.
Oh,
Uh,
awesome.
until, like I said, until I saw his name, it didn't even click that he was on that book. Um, but yeah, once I started looking into him, it's amazing, how many connections that these guys from this age of comics, they just, they had their hands in everything. Everybody worked for every company here and there and wrote on this book or pinned that book, or it's pretty crazy how prolific these guys were.
I mean, speaking of guys that crossed over with several different characters and titles, the pencilers on these issues, we get a different penciler for each issue. On number 332, we get I would say a relatively well known, if you're a more modern fan, you probably know the creation of that this man had a key role in making, probably more than his name, was Don Perlin. He penciled issue 332, and then Mark Bright penciled issue 333. Let's first jump into a little bit about Don Perlin. He is best known for his works on books like Werewolf by Night, Moon Knight, The Defenders, Ghost Rider, and he did a 2-year stint on a little book called Transformers. And he's probably most famously known alongside co-creator Doug Monk for creating the character of Mark Spector, the Moon Knight. So I know there's Transformers in there, there's Moon Knight in there. Eric, does anything jump off the page? Anything you remember maybe from the 80s about Don Perlin's work?
Yeah. Don, like you said, with the Moon Knight connection. So Moon Knight is one of my all-time favorite Marvel characters. I've loved that character since as far back as I can remember, and so I read a lot of those early Moon Knight books, and I did remember Don's name from those runs. And I didn't realize that he had ties to Transformers until you sent me those notes, which is really cool because we talked a little bit about it, but at this time when these books were being released was right as Transformers was exploding in the United States. Like Hasbro had just gotten the licenses for the toys from Takara in Japan, and Marvel writers, we talked about Bob Budiansky and Jim Shooter.
Yeah.
Those were the guys that were writing the character bios on the back of the toys, on the boxes the toys came in.
Yep.
Which is really cool. So yeah, lots of cool Marvel tiebacks and call outs for their Transformer book, their early Transformer book, and as well as the toys, and like I said, Moon Knight's awesome.
I mean, really, I could do a full tangent on on Moon Knight, but I think to have somebody, where artists and creators and writers can go their whole career and not create something, as even as awesome as they are, they can go their whole careers and not create something half as cool as Moon Knight. And it's awesome. Like, soon Moon Knight's going to be getting his own Disney Plus show. And that's going to be fantastic. Moon Knight is such a great character, and he's so different from a lot of those vigilante type, characters. I know that sometimes he gets compared to it's like Marvel's Batman.
Right.
But I think you would agree there's some pretty significant differences between Mark Spector and Bruce Wayne and the alter egos of Moon Knight and Batman. But we've got one of the co-creators of a great character on this book. The issue 333, illustrated by Mark Bright. Mark Bright did a few fill-in issues as the pre-Simonson era was ending on Thor. And Mark Bright would go on to do some work on Power Man and Iron Fist. He would do Iron Man work during the Armor Wars storyline, which is a seminal, Iron Man story. And speaking of 80s toy-related titles, he would also do some artwork on the G.I. Joe comic that Marvel was doing at the time. Mark Bright pencils this issue, and he would go on to do some really cool stuff. But any thoughts on Mark Bright before we move on to a few more well-known names, Eric?
No, not really.
Okay.
It the GI Joe Marvel comic was kind of like their Transformers, right? Like for me, it was such a different direction to think about Marvel doing a Transformers book or a GI Joe book, specifically tying them back to the toys, right?
Yeah.
It just shows you, that early '80s how far Hasbro and Mattel and Kenner, those companies that made those toys, how far they would go with their marketing plan.
Yeah.
To get comics and cartoons and cereal and just everything under the sun.
Yeah, anything. Slap the Transformers, the He-Man or the Thundercats on anything, because really, I mean, I think we can both agree the comics were meant to sell the toys. It wasn't the other way. It wasn't the other way around. And I mean, really, the comics were, like you said, a form of merchandising, of getting it out there. Like, oh, come on, kids! Like, get these fun toys. Like, you could play with Megatron and Optimus Prime in your bedroom. Like, if you had the toys of these comics are just
completely different philosophy than toy marketing today. I feel like.
I know we've even talked about this with the '80s. A lot of '80s cartoons. Like really. That's a half an hour commercial every Saturday.
Yeah, it's just a vehicle to sell you toys.
Exactly. So let's jump on to the inks for these issues and then the cover art, and then we'll jump into these issues, and we'll delay no further. And I know this is a controversial person we're about to bring up. And obviously Eric and I were not in the room when these comics are being created, so we don't know anything definitive. But a lot of how do I say this, firsthand accounts of this man's work have been, let's say, controversial at best. So these issues are inked by whether you love him or hate him, a legendary name in Marvel Comics, and he is most tied to his work on Thor, with Jack Kirby as the penciler. The inker I'm talking about is Vince Colletta. Vince Colletta inks these two issues, and he's Eric. He's nothing but controversial. What is your opinion? If we can keep it somewhat brief, what is your opinion on Vince Colletta? Love him, hate him, don't care. Like, where are you at with Vince Colletta, as if it matters?
Exactly like you said. You love him or hate him, he was a creator at the time and a massive contributor to these characters and these books. I don't really, like you said, to keep it brief, I don't really have a whole lot to say as far as his other proclivities, but
I've heard the sentiment that, like, oh man, Vince Colletta ruined Jack Kirby art by the way he inked, and I'm like, can you truly ruin Jack Kirby art?
Right. Yeah.
To me, he's one of those guys. Like, obviously, you can do things to enhance and take away, but like at the end of the day, it's Jack Kirby art. And it's pretty hard to ruin, the greatest illustrator in comics history's art. But so we got Vince Colletta on these issues, and Eric and I are reading these issues off of the Marvel Unlimited app, so obviously they've been remastered in certain ways. We're not looking at the original inkings. We're looking at some highly reworked and possibly edited stuff. So we'll jump into the cover art for these issues, a name that some modern comic fans may know more. It's Bill Sienkiewicz. Bill Sienkiewicz did the two covers for these issues. He was, a prodigy at the time, and his portfolio came across the desks at Marvel, actually the desk of one Vince Colletta, and he's also tied to Moon Knight. He did a lot of work on Moon Knight. He did the New Mutants in the 80s, and he also was known for doing cover art, which obviously he does in these issues right here. He did cover art on titles like Dazzler, Transformers, like we've mentioned, and a very timely reference. He did the cover for the comic adaptation of the original Dune film. So, those of you that have maybe watched the current remake of Dune, Bill Sienkiewicz did the cover art for the original Dune comic. There's a little bit of trivia that you can break out at the world's nerdiest Halloween party. Uh, but yeah, Bill Sienkiewicz, Eric, any thoughts on him as a creator? Just before we jump into the actual issues.
That's another one of those names, that I wouldn't have placed it if you just brought up his name in conversation. But yeah, the Dune thing is cool because I remember
Yeah.
The Dune comics, and I liked those a lot. And I liked the Dune books, and the original film was a favorite of mine. So that's pretty neat.
Okay, let's. Oh, good grief! I just totally brain farted right there. I'm gonna edit that out hardcore. Oh shit. That's the first time that's happened to me. You're like, I like the Dune movie, and I was like, okay. Okay, I'm gonna start back in like 10 seconds, and then we'll jump into the issues.
Yeah.
Okay, before we jump into an entire different side conversation about the Dune movies, which regretfully I have yet to see the remake. I'm planning on watching it soon. For those of you that have enjoyed the new Dune movie, follow us on social media. Talk to me about Dune. That'd be a cool little fun conversation to have. But now for our Halloween special, let's jump into Thor versus Dracula, the weird crossing of different realms kind of action that we're going to get out of these two issues. Here is leading into these issues, because this is not part of our throwback series. Here's just a little bit of a lead up to where Thor and Dracula are at this point in Marvel Comics. And here's where we're at with Thor. First and foremost, Thor has been facing off lately in his book with classic famous villains of his, like the Dark Man, Graviton, the Scarlet Scarab, Megatax, and the Crusader. Names that every Thor fan hears when you think of top villains of Thor's. Obviously, all those villains not classics. They're kind of just villain of the month guys, and Thor's just kind of been he's been standing them up and knocking them down. And he and Sif are living on Earth, and Sif is finding it really difficult to adjust to life on Midgard. So it's probably generous to say that we're not at a high point in Thor's comic history. But like I said, we're about to get to the Simonson era, so things are about to change for Thor dramatically, and that's where we find ourselves with this just fun, weird story of him versus Dracula. The Marvel version of Dracula goes all the way back to a little-known comic back in the 50s called Suspense. And he debuted in Suspense #7 as a short backup story, and that's where the first appearance of Dracula in Marvel Comics shows up. But it wasn't really until the 70s where Dracula got his own title, The Tomb of Dracula, in 1972. And a little comic book, a little nerdy fact here: it was originally written by Jerry Conway, and it was penciled and inked by Gene Colan. They were the first team to be on the Tomb of Dracula book. And by the time of these issues of Thor, Dracula has been a constant presence in Marvel Comics. The Tomb of Dracula book had, just seen so many different issues at that point, and he appears in so many of the different horror comics like Werewolf by Night, alongside, Jack Russell the werewolf and Blade the vampire hunter. And so Dracula's been pretty consistent in his appearances in the comics up until these issues. This issue is kind of part cop drama and it's part monster movie. It's very stark in its contrast. It feels like two different storylines that are, very inexplicably mashed together. And here's a brief synopsis of the issue, and then we'll just start breaking down, just have a little fun with this wacky story. Jane Foster has gone missing, and Don Blake is the prime suspect. Meanwhile, as if that drama and that tension wasn't enough, meanwhile, Dracula rises after an undead sleep. And which Asgardian does he have his sight on next? So, leading into this issue, Eric, I'm just curious, like, Tomb of Dracula, where Thor is at this time, these characters, as we settle into this story, had you read Tomb of Dracula at all? I feel like that might have been a title that's up your alley.
Yeah, I have read. It wasn't something that I went out and bought a whole lot of books from, but I have read a couple of them. I don't even. Now that I'm thinking about it, I don't even think the issues that I did read were even mine. I think they were someone else's, and I just borrowed them because I thought they looked cool.
Well, of course.
But yeah, it's interesting too because, and I'm sure we'll talk about it as we get into the issue. But you know, Dracula's a pretty dark character, and even in the Marvel universe, you know.
Yeah.
And these books, these two books in particular, are fairly dark. And you know, we talked about the ties to Moon Knight, which is also a darker book for Marvel. So I think there's, you know, the guys working on these books, it comes across in these stories. There's some, you know, there's some scenes and some parts to these particular books that I was like, wow, that's pretty dark, Marvel.
There's a certain part that when we get there, I'm just like, I feel like how did this happen? And really, like, we're coming off of the 70s, and in the 70s, Marvel had this resurgence of horror comics. You had more monster comics happening, you know, like we've mentioned it several times, you know, Werewolf by Night, Tomb of Dracula, and there were other, you know, different like supernatural suspense titles that were being produced at that point. Because I feel like, whether I don't really know a lot about the Comics Code Authority, but it seemed like at that point, either Marvel cared less about what the Comics Code had to say, or the Comics Code was lifting, because there's a stark contrast between, you know, how 60s, you know, kind of comics are written, and then in the 70s it feels like the doors get kind of blown open a little bit, and they're able to talk about more stuff. Like, I mean, at a certain point in the 70s, there's literally a book that's titled The Son of Satan.
Yeah.
Like, how much more occult and demonic can you get than The Son of Satan? That's I think it's Damon Hellstorm, I believe. I'm not an expert on that title, but it has come across my Marvel Unlimited app recently. So we're at a point where the worlds of superhero and horror comics are colliding in this book, and let's just break the book down and kind of dig into these few Halloween spooky situations that Eric and I have alluded to, especially the ones where we're like, how in the world did that get past an editor? You know, how in the world did that get put together? So in the first few pages, we learn that Don Blake is a suspect in the disappearance of Jane Foster. And as Thor, he heads off to find this mystical artifact called the Rune Staff of Camotharn. And that doesn't really play a significant part in these stories, but Thor would go on to chase after that artifact after these stories are done. But he goes off to find this Rune Staff because he thinks it will unlock where Jane is. And it takes him to, you know, he goes from Chicago to New York to the Avengers Mansion, and then he comes back to Chicago. And meanwhile, while this is happening with Jane and the Rune Staff, these cult followers of Dracula do this, or I don't know what I would, like a seance or something. They do cult stuff. They do cult stuff, and they raise Dracula out of his coffin, because, you know, that's what you do in a vampire story. You bring a vampire back. Dracula flies out into the night, and as Thor is returning from New York to the rooftops of Chicago, he flies by in his bat form, and he senses like an extra powerful essence, and he starts to have interest in Sif's godly blood. He continues along his flight path, and then I'm assuming this is one of the parts that kind of caught you, Eric. He comes upon a group of teenagers, he attacks them, and he drinks their blood. So that's about halfway through this issue. If you're like, wow, this is already a crazy story, it gets crazier. But Eric, halfway through this issue, like, where were you at with this story, especially Dracula ambushing a group of teenagers?
Right. Yeah. That was one thing I will say about this part of the book is there's a great panel or two panels on this page that just screams late 70s, early 80s. It's like the writers, they crammed in as many references, like pop culture references, that they could in this one page. Like, one of the guys is talking about, why don't we go play Atari all night, or I'll record General Hospital on the Betamax. And then
on the Betamax.
And then I think one of them's when they see Dracula, or when Dracula kind of takes on his form in front of them, they say something like, "Oh no, it's like Friday the 13th."
It's like, yeah, it's like Friday the 13th. It's like you know what? We get it. We get it. Pop culture. We understand.
But
You're right.
all within like 3 panels on this page, you get all these nice little throwback pop culture references that, a kid reading the book today would be like, "What is this? This is Moon Man talk."
This Moon Man talk. Honestly, it feels very Stan Lee, because like he never shied away from fitting in a timely reference. But it's like the editor would go like, you know what, Alan? They said Alan Zelenetz, as he's writing, he's like, we need more current references that the kids are gonna like. Why don't you talk about Atari, man? Why don't we talk about what's on the Betamax?
Throw something in there about the Betamax.
Yeah. What kind of shows are the kids watching these days? General Hospital? Hell yeah, put that in there.
But yeah, and then it quickly turns very dark, because he ambushes them, attacks them, and presumably drinks their blood and kills them.
Yeah, and this, listener, go back and if you don't read any other part of this, read pages 9 and 10 of issue 332, and it's honestly, this could be its own little mini comic, because it's so out of context, it would still be funny. But like Friday the 13th, and then he appears out of the shadow and just eviscerates these 3 teenagers. So yeah, how did that get past someone in editorial? Right. It's like, okay, we'll have them attack some teenagers and drink their blood. No big deal. So the detective who was in charge of Blake's case for the disappearance of Jane, he becomes involved in this case with the 3 teenagers dying, and he asks Don Blake for his opinion on the victims' bodies and what happened to them. And then as Thor, he promises to track down the killer, and Dracula is meanwhile Dracula's kind of obsessing about Sif's blood, because he thinks that if he can just get some of that good sweet blood, Eric, he can achieve immortality or have more power. It's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of ambiguous. He's just like, hey, I want that blood because, man, that's really good blood, and I just gotta have it. And then as Sif sleeps, Thor goes out and he patrols the city. And here we come to the main action scene of the issue. He's attacked by a powerful follower of Dracula, and then as he's on his way to the graveyard where these 3 teenagers have already been buried, which is very efficient, the dead teenagers emerge out of their plots and they go to attack the graveyard keeper, and Thor arrives just in time to fight them. They transform into 3 massive bats, and Thor fights off these undead monsters, and the fight ends pretty definitively. He does some good tough talking here, some classic Thor tough talking, and then back at Thor and Sif's apartment to kind of lead off the next issue with a dramatic curve. We see Dracula arrive to the apartment. He bites Sif, and then we get that to be continued. So Eric, as we kind of finish up issue 332 of our spooky adventure, when Thor is fighting these bats, what was your favorite bit of Thor tough talk as he's fighting these bats?
Oh man, I'm not looking at the page, so I can't remember exactly what he said.
I'll give you one of mine. When he grabs one of these bats by the wing, and these bats are like maybe like a 50-pound bat. I mean, that's terrifying. A 50-pound bat is terrifying, but it's not like he's fighting a dragon. And he says, "Thou dost possess the strength of 1,000 fiends." And okay, it's just a bat, man. And then he just like smashes it with a hammer. 3 panels later, it's like, yeah, that was really tough. You made that look really tough.
They just kind of evaporate, because I think before the graveyard scene, he comes across one of the new vampires, right?
Yes, yeah.
And it's attacking a woman, and he basically just hits it with Mjolnir, and the thing he just evaporates. Like he just like,
yeah, it turns into like ash or it turns into dust. Yes.
And you learn that Mjolnir is not only a mystical hammer, but it also has holy properties, apparently. And I wasn't aware of that, and it kind of reminded me. You and I have had conversations about convenient superpowers.
Oh, of course. Mjolnir is a Deus Ex Machina for anything.
Yeah.
Just he's a get out of jail free card for anything. Oh my goodness. So we leave on this cliffhanger. Dracula's over Sif, and Dracula proclaims, "My ravishing goddess, now you are mine." Bum bum bum. And then readers at the time had to wait an entire month before the conclusion of this dramatic battle with Dracula. Now, Thor and Dracula have not even seen each other yet. So the cover of the next issue is, I take a little bit of issue with the cover of 333. The cover shows us an awesome piece of artwork of Sif being commanded by Dracula to go after Thor, and Thor is kind of in this hesitant pose of like, oh no, I don't want to fight. I don't want to fight against Sif. But funny thing about that, Eric, that never happens in the issue.
Yeah, and it is a cool cover. You're right. I really like that cover, and it's a classic. It's a very classic Marvel like bait and switch cat tactic that they used to do with their covers from time to time.
The shifty salesman.
Where you see that cover, and I mean, the cover is the reason you buy the book most of the time, right?
Yep.
See that awesome artwork, and you grab the book, and then you read the story, and you're like, well, this didn't go the direction I thought it was going to go.
So when I first, I've read this issue a few times, because I like the corniness, I love the cheesiness. Like yourself, I enjoy the Universal Monster stories. So I've read this a few times, and when I saw the cover the first time, I was like, oh, Dracula's gonna like use mind control to have Sif fight against Thor, and we're gonna get a Thor versus Sif, showdown. What?
A vampire Sif.
Exactly. Like the cover shows you. So the entire issue, I'm waiting for this fight to happen, and it never happens. It actually never even comes close to happening. There's never one point where you think that Sif might be used as a as a foil against Thor, which honestly, in my opinion, would have been a better plan if Dracula's like this mastermind. But
Right, and you gotta imagine that Sif has a better chance of beating Thor than 90% of Thor's villains.
right, right. And I mean, and on the cover of the issue, it literally says at Dracula's command. So all of that what if and that hypothetical aside, how Eric and I think we could have rewritten this issue better. Really, how we think the cover could have actually followed through with what it promised us. Come on, guys. Here's the actual breakdown of the actual issue and what actually happened. We pick up from last time, and Sif wakes up after having been bit by Dracula. And it's really not explained in the issue that overtly, but she's under the influence of Dracula at this point, and she's suffering from a form of amnesia where she doesn't remember certain things. She keeps calling Dracula her lover, even though she's never seen him before. And Thor meets with Doctor Strange in this issue. Doctor Strange is his go-to person for all this kind of occult stuff that he's struggling with understanding. He gets some help trying to figure out where the rune staff is, because that storyline is still happening in these issues. And Strange magically senses that Sif is under the control of Dracula. So Thor flies back off to face off against the Lord of the Vampires. Eric, awesome guest star appearance by Doctor Strange here. I what did you think of his guest appearance in this issue? Because Doctor Strange is at a point in his history where his books are very inconsistent, and he has some running series, but mostly he's showing up as guest star in other people's books. So what was your thought on his appearance here in 333?
I liked it. I thought it was Doctor Strange is a badass, right?
Yes.
and how chill is he?
Oh my gosh, the chillest.
Chatting with Thor about Dracula, like
yeah.
Just he has no there's no real sense of urgency. It's like he knows that he can just if he had to, he could just wipe Dracula off the planet if he needed to. He's just so laid back about it.
If I could sum up Doctor Strange's whole kind of like attitude here, it'd be like, you know what? Not that worried, man. Not that worried. Eric and I have a friend here where we live in Nebraska who is very, very much like, no worries, man. No worries. It's no big deal. It's all going to turn out good. That is Doctor Strange in this. He's like, we're going to figure it out. Don't worry. Go home, get some rest, like before you go off and fight Dracula. There's a few lines in here that I just want to draw some attention to because of out of context how just freaking hilarious they are. There is a point where Doctor Strange is telling him like, hey, I can help you, but we got to go to this other room in my house to figure this out. So he's walking just gently up a staircase, and he says, now come with me to my chamber of shadows to consult my mystic orb. I was like, okay, Steven, weird. And then
the coolest toys.
Yes, come to my toy room. Whoa, Steven. And then he just as they're kind of probing Thor's mind to figure out where things are, where the rune staff might be, he just offhandedly says, wait, there's an aura of malevolence surrounding Sif. Thor, what do you know about vampires? And up until this point, no one has mentioned vampires yet. But just completely out of the blue, how much do you know about vampires, Thor? So after Thor breaks down all the stuff with the rune staff and Sif and Dracula at his place in New York, Thor flies back to Chicago, and when he gets back, he discovers that Sif is missing. Blake goes and he closes his office for the rest of the day to search for Sif as Thor. Dracula and Sif back in his apartment place that he's hanging out. They discuss their, their quote unquote their love, which is weird because Sif has only been a vampire for like a day now, and they make their plans to go to the opera. Thor returns to the police station and he gets a tip that one of Dracula's followers is kind of lurking and roaming around the city nearby. He confronts this cult follower and he finds out that Dracula's going to the opera. And then a weird little thing happens where the cultist that has given up the location of his master goes back to the cult's hideout and he immediately kills himself for betraying Dracula. So we've reached the culmination of this arc, and we're about to get the fight between Thor and Dracula. But Eric, the lead up to this has been kind of choppy. We've seen a lot of different stuff, and it ends with a cultist completely, killing himself off. So we're at this midpoint. What are your thoughts up until the fight begins?
We talked about it a little bit already, but man, these books get dark quick, don't they?
Yeah,
They,
right.
they uh, like I said before, there's definitely darker books in the Marvel universe, especially around this time period. Like you said, with Werewolf by Night, and we talked about Moon Knight, and we've talked about all those things.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are parts in both of these books that are still very surprising, and that was one of them as well. Uh, you know,
Yeah, the guy
there's a
just walks in the door, stabs himself.
there's a body count to these books, which is kind of
Right?
crazy.
There's usually with Thor comics, you don't like I honestly don't think of like blood and death in these books a lot. They're usually a
Right.
lot lighter or they're a lot more cosmic and intergalactic. You don't think of cultist followers, offing themselves when you
Right.
think of, Thor comics.
Yeah, and Dracula eating teenagers and
It's not standard Thor fare.
like he does.
Yeah. Hey,
Yeah.
man, I feel like we're in Friday the 13th, man. Uh, but
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It's a pretty stark direction changed from, like you said, the normal Thor books that we read and we talk about.
yeah, exactly. The scene quickly shifts to the opera building where Thor crashes the event and he calls out Dracula. He goes down the aisle, he calls him out, and the two take their fight to the rooftops of the city. And here's where we get a lot of cool panels artistically. They both try to command the elements of rain and thunder and lightning, and that ends in a stalemate. I don't know how Dracula is powerful enough to cause a stalemate when the god of thunder is calling on the elements, but they resort to their physical power, and it causes Dracula to transform into not his bat form, but his gaseous form. They fight a little bit here and there, and the fight ends with Thor summoning lightning and he electrocutes Dracula while he's in his gaseous state. Then he evaporates, he flies away, and we actually we're going to learn where that story continues in just a moment. With the battle won, Dracula is defeated. His power over Sif is done, and then Doctor Strange appears before Thor and he says, "Hey, don't worry, I'm gonna go track down Dracula," because he knows that Thor and Sif are gonna go off to chase after the rune staff, which is on a distant planet. Of course, we're about to go back into more traditional Thor issues while Doctor Strange goes off and finishes the threat of Dracula. And that is curtains. That is seen on our read through of the issue. But this final fight, Eric, I want to know just maybe like some of your favorite panels, some of your favorite moments as Thor and Dracula face off on the rooftops of Chicago.
The ultimate fight between the two of them. Like you said, the commanding of the weather thing was uh, a little different, but it was
Yeah.
also kind of cool because you don't see Thor come to a whole lot of stalemates with his enemies like that, at least on that.
Yes.
And uh, it's you gotta love when they explain their plan, right?
I love it. There's nothing in comics I love more than when heroes and villains explain everything they're about to do or that they've just done.
Yeah, and
It's the
when
best.
Dracula makes that transition into the mist, and Thor uh, explains that not only is he going, this is his plan, but it's going to work. Just so you know. But and then at the end, like you said, when Doctor Strange pops up and he says, "Don't worry about it, I'll mop this up. You go fly off and find the staff." Uh,
The,
Once again, Doctor Strange just popping in to make things better.
he's just like well, you said earlier, he's just so calm, cool, collected. He's truly the mystical badass of the Marvel universe.
Yeah, yeah.
He's just so he's so unflappable most of the time. There, one of the lines you were talking about when uh when Dracula's in his gaseous form, and Thor is sending the hammer after him. He says, "Again, your mallet." And like, hey, you tried this before. You're gonna try this again. You are a greater fool than I would have imagined. Okay. He's got some real trash talk.
Yeah.
But Thor, this is Thor's book. This is Thor's Midgard to protect. So Dracula is dispatched, and then we see Thor and Sif fly off at the end of the issue to go on their next adventure. This Hunt for Dracula story, the Doctor Strange story that continues, is in issues 60 and 62 of what would have been the current run of Doctor Strange at that point. And Strange partners up with Wanda Maximoff, the Scarlet Witch, the Monica Rambeau version of Captain Marvel, and another occult kind of horror character that we know, Eric Brooks, aka Blade. They all track down Dracula, and they seemingly kill him, which we know with Dracula, he always finds a way to come back, and he actually becomes a pretty persistent enemy of Doctor Strange from that point on. So Thor and Sif go on and search for the rune staff, and they get a few more issues out of that storyline, and then the complete creative direction of the book changes when some guy named Walt Simonson is handed the book, and he completely revamps the entire thing. He begins one of the most celebrated runs in the character's history just a few months after this. So we're at an interesting point in Thor's history, but we can always make a pit stop here to talk about some weird, crazy, fun Thor Dracula stories. So, Eric, before we close down the Halloween special, any final thoughts on these issues? I mean, I really enjoyed getting these out and chatting with you about them.
I really liked it, man. I did, and not just saying that because it's Halloween and it's one of my favorite holidays, but it's
You do
always,
love Halloween.
I
That
do.
is true.
uh, it's very cool to me to see something like this. Like I said, it's a completely different direction as far as how dark and gloomy and grim that these books are. But
Yeah.
when you introduce Dracula to a storyline, you're kind of asking for that, right? He's a pretty mean, nasty guy in the Marvel universe.
Yes.
He's not that the romantic Dracula. He's definitely out to cause some trouble and out to kill some people. And I'm gonna go and look at those Doctor Strange issues just because
Yeah.
I want to see that team up. Sounds awesome. First off, and
It-
then you get to see Doctor Strange, kick a little Dracula butt. So
I mean, you had me at Scarlet Witch, Captain Marvel, and Blade. It
right,
was
exactly.
that team up just sounds good enough. So if you want to continue the story, like I said, go and read the run of Doctor Strange from the early 80s, and issues 60 and 62 are gonna give you the conclusion of this Dracula story. But that is gonna do it for us on this Halloween special. Thanks, Eric. As always, you're a blast to have on and talk comics, man. We'll see you down the road, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. As always, happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween! That is going to do it for our Halloween special today, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this breakdown of Thor versus Dracula with my good friend Eric Fisher. We had a blast having this chat, and we hope that you enjoyed this spooky showdown here on our Halloween special. Before we leave you today, I want to just say, if you have not given us a rating, a review, or a subscription, please do that before you leave today, before you go out and enjoy all your Halloween festivities. Go give us a rating, a 5-star rating, a review. Tell us what you enjoyed about the Halloween special, and subscribe so that whenever we put up a new special like this, or a bonus episode, or even our regular weekly episodes, you will know that they are there and you can listen to them as soon as possible. That would be awesome. And if you want to continue the conversation with us, go to Facebook, join our brand new group, Across the Bifrost, continue the conversation there with some great people who love Thor and love just talking comics, talking movies, talking whatever it is we want to talk about in the world of Marvel's Mighty Thor. And then if you're on Instagram, go follow us at Mighty Thor Podcast. Continue the conversation there if you are an Instagrammer. So those are great ways to reach out to us. Those are great ways to support the show. But go out, go have some Halloween fun, and I hope that we see you next time aboard the Rainbow Bridge. Until then, dear listener, I say to you, stay worthy.